Hello, 441-465. My name is Captain Dralt, commander of the 441 and 465. Today's topic is going to be the Uniform Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. So there's been some confusion about this, what your role as an employee is and what the role of the employer is, and then where the Army kind of fits in that. So this should help clear all that up, and then we'll keep this posted here on the YouTube, so that way if you guys ever run into questions, you can always kind of defer. Additionally, I'll post some additional links in the below, so that way you guys can go ahead and go to these resources for yourself, and then go ahead and get educated, all right? So let's go ahead and get started. So first, the overview. The purpose of this slideshow is to provide basic information about USERRA's provisions. So again, it's to show what USERRA pretty much does. All right, the slideshow is not meant to cover everything exhaustively. There is a 3 to 4 hour actual brief that the lawyers give, and it covers everything in minute detail. This is going to be a quick 1 hour skim over, and basically intended to give you guys the resources so that way you guys can go ahead and follow through with it, okay? If more help is needed, never hesitate to ask the command. I'm always here. I'm always available for you. Same thing with the full-time staff, first sergeant, and everyone else, all right? So on that note, let's get started with some of the history. So on this slide, you can kind of see where it started. It started in the 1940s with the VRRA. And then USERRA actually came about in 1994. Since then, there's been a couple iterations. It was amended in 1996, 1998, 2000, 2004, and 2008. Big takeaway from this slide is it's constantly evolving and it's changing to better fit the work dynamic, okay? But at the end of the day, this is here for us as soldiers, as citizen soldiers, so that way we can go ahead and do what we need to do. All right. Definitions. Definitions provided by USERRA and USERRA regulations must be used in interpreting the law. Some of the definitions are different from how those are commonly used. For example, Puerto Rico is a state for USERRA purposes. Okay. Discrimination. We've already taken the EEO course earlier this for ECT, and this is also an annual requirement. However, the broad prohibition of employer discrimination on the basis of a person's membership or application for membership in the service, performance of the service, or service obligations. Provisions apply to all positions of employment and offers of employment. So they cannot discriminate against you for being in the service. Retaliation. Employers may not retaliate against a person who enforces a USERRA right, testifies, assists in investigation, etc. USERRA protects an employee from employer retaliation regardless whether the employee has any past or current military connection. Employers covered, so everyone. So this is almost every employer out there is covered by USERRA. For covered service, most types of military services are covered. Voluntary or involuntary, peacetime or wartime, active and reserve, fitness for service examinations, national disaster, and medical system. So the key things right here to pull out would be the involuntary. So for virtual battle assemblies, that is a involuntary service because you are required to show up to those battle assemblies. For voluntary, is if you are jumping on for a net fielding or some sort of condition like that. All right, you don't. The employer cannot specify whether something is important for you to join, or something is not important enough for you to join. It is the military that's saying, hey, this soldier's coming, they will be here. All right. And then finally, fitness for service. So that is going to be command directed activities, such as we command direct somebody to go to behavioral health and get assessed, or we're command directing somebody to go do their LHI, right? So LHI also kind of fits in that weird little bubble. Okay. So National Guard, not going to spend too much time on this, but just so you guys can kind of see, the National Guard is protected by USERRA unless they are doing something for the state. All right, so like called up by the governor for a national disaster or something like that. All right, if that's the case, then they're covered by state law. We don't need to worry about that, but that's something to keep in your back pocket in case it ever comes up. Okay. Reemployment eligibility. Certain criteria must be met to be eligible for reemployment. So advance notice. That means you tell your employer that you're coming back. 5-year cumulative service limit. So if you're gone longer than 5 years, you may not be eligible for reemployment. Again, that comes with with some extra add-ons, but as a rule of thumb, 5 years is your service limit for you to return back to your old job. Timely return for reemployment application. So we'll cover that later for your timeline. But essentially, when you get back, so let's say we were deployed and then we get back, you have a certain amount of time until you have to go back to work. All right. So that rest time is meant there for you to get your mind right. Okay. And then, like I said, we'll cover that later in some of these other slides. And then finally, your character of service. So if you left on good service, then you should be good. If you're dishonorably discharged, then that might be a factor for you not getting reemployed. Advance notice. So again, advance notice may be given to the employer by the service member or the military unit. So if you don't feel comfortable telling your employer all the time for all of the tasks and all of the things that you need to go, do not hesitate to reach out to myself, the full-time staff, or anyone within the unit, so that way they can go ahead and vouch and say, hey, our soldier's going to go to ECT, our soldier needs to do this net fielding, etc., etc. And that's why we do these written letters, which ties into the second bullet. The advance notice may be verbal or written. We try to do written as much as possible, but a verbal warning or a verbal advance notice is just as credible, and you'll see later where that kind of plays into it. Okay, and then should be given as far in advance as possible, as reasonable. So if you've known for ECT, like some of you have known, we've had these dates for months and we have not changed it, and you tell your employer the day before, they have to let you go, but you will be on really thin ice, and that's where it gets kind of dicey. If you look on the USERRA webpage, there's actually some pretty good examples of some soldiers doing just that. And then it puts them in a precarious location. But bottom line, regardless of how far in advance you tell them, they still need to let you go, but you'll be facing the repercussions when you get back. Notice is not required if precluded by military necessity, meaning it was a national security issue. Notice not required if giving notice is impossible or unreasonable under all circumstances. So again, this is one of those MET-TC constraints. Again, it's good practice to let your boss know what you're planning on doing, so that way they can adjust. That's part of that kind of professionalism. The 5-year service limit, we covered this earlier. So this applies to the period of service, not absence. Does not include service performed while working for a previous employer, and includes some service performed before USERRA was enacted. This is kind of where it gets a little dicey, but again, if you're on military orders, if you're AGR and you're longer than 5 years and you try and get back to your old job, it probably won't happen. Some exceptions: your obligated service, required training, involuntary service, or in support of a war / contingency, whatever. So these are the examples where you can go beyond your 5 years. And then this is the timely return / application. If service is less than 30 days, return to work generally the first shift the next day after the completion of work, with time added for travel and rest. If the service is more than 30 but less than 180 days, 81, excuse me, apply within 14 days after service is complete. If service is more than 180 days, apply within 90 days after service is complete. All right. Again, these are rules of thumb dictated by law. So when I was deployed and I was on my way back, I gave my employer a heads up. I'm like, hey, I'm probably going to take this month off, and they were okay with it. But after that 30 days, I jumped right back into it. That's going to be something that, again, is kind of met TC. But at 90 days, you need to be either returning back or they can let you go. Timely return application reporting. Application deadline can be extended for up to 2 years for recovery from illness or injury or aggravated during the period of service. So WTU, communicate with your employer and they should be able to work with you, okay? Documentation of service. So this very heavily plays upon the warning and the after. So prior to ECT, prior to VBA, prior to net fielding, I know that it's very difficult to get orders almost until the day of. All right. By you notifying your employer verbally or with a letter from the command, that counts as your activation or your notice that you will be leaving. But on completion, you need to have the documentation as stated in the slide, okay? That documentation is what's going to give you, what's going to validate what we've said and what you've done, okay? So I'm not going to beat this one a little bit anymore, but essentially after ECT, after VBA, all of that, you should be getting, completion for orders. You'll have signed orders, but after virtual battle assemblies and regular battle assemblies, what you guys will have are your pay stubs. All right. And that also counts too, because you're being paid for your service. Character of service. These are the different types that make an individual ineligible for reemployment. Pretty self-explanatory. We're going to go ahead and move on. Benefits during the service. Employee considered on furlough or leave of absence while performing service. Entitled to non-seniority benefits given similarly situated employees on non-military leave. So what that's saying is, while you're on leave, you're considered on leave, and you are entitled to non-seniority benefits, just like it says down there. And then we'll cover some of that a little bit more, so it's a little bit more clear in following slides, okay? Benefits during service. So if non-seniority benefits provided by an employer vary for different types of non-military leave, service member is to be given the most favorable treatment so long as non-military leave is comparable. Comparability explained in the DOL USERRA regulations. So they can't give you a benefit that is less than what you would take for your military leave if your job offers military leave. Vacation. Employee must be permitted to use accrued vacation or similar paid leave while performing services. An employee may not be required to use accrued vacation or similar paid leave while performing services. So, in a nutshell, if you're leaving for military duty and you have vacation that you want to use so that way you get double pay, that's allowed. However, if you want to save that vacation and take that vacation after, you can definitely do that. So this stipulation is basically saying your vacation is your vacation, and your employer really can't say what qualifies and what doesn't. Now that comes with a giant asterisk. That's going to be employer determined. However, for the sake of military duty, if you're gone for those 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, then you can go ahead and take that vacation to cover that period as well. If you can't, or if you don't want to, then you can definitely take that vacation later and then not use any time with it, not use any vacation during that time frame. Okay. Health plans. Employee, upon request, entitled to continuation coverage under employment plan during absence for service. So while you're away, you're entitled to the continuation of coverage. Employee may be required to pay up to 102% of total cost of continuing coverage if period of service is 31 days or more. Employee pays normal employee share for coverage if period of service is less than 31 days. So essentially, if you want to remain on your health care plan with your employer and you're out for more than 31 days, then you can definitely keep it, but you have to pay a little extra. Side note, while you're on military orders, you are covered under the military for your health. Okay. If coverage is terminated during the period of service, it must be reinstated immediately upon reemployment. No waiting periods or exclusions permitted, except for exclusions of conditions determined by the VA to be service connected. So again, if you're over that 31 days and you cancel your health plan to not pay it so that you don't have to pay it, when you get back, you can go ahead and reinstate it with that, and you can reinstate it immediately. Basic entitlement is to the escalator position. The position the person would have attained had their employment been continuous. So escalator position, I mean, just think of an escalator, right? So if you're on that fast track and you're moving up in position and then you get deployed or you have to go to training, if you are away, then you would still, it would be as if you're still climbing that seniority rank. Now, it doesn't always go up, okay? Something with the thing with the escalators are they can go up and they can go down, right? So if your job is being downsized and that's all across the board, then you will be downsized with that, okay? So it's your position and what would happen as if you never even left, okay? The escalator, oh, there we go. Escalator doesn't always go up. The escalator position reflects what would have happened if a person had remained at work. The reemployment position could involve a promotion, no change, or even termination depending on the circumstances. In determining proper reemployment position, certain factors must be considered, including length of the most recent military service, qualifications of the employee, and any disability incurred or aggravated during services. If service was less than 91 days, escalator position, or if not qualified, pre-service position, or if not qualified, nearest approximation of escalator or pre-service position in that order for which the person can become qualified. If service is more than 90 days, escalator position or like position if not qualified, pre-service position or like position if not qualified. So essentially, these two slides are saying if you leave within 30 days, you may not get if you leave within that 90 days, you may not get that promotion because it's generally not feasible that you would do that. However, met TC, and the same thing with 90 days. If you're gone for greater than 90 days, then they'll take that into consideration when you get back in, okay? Disabled during service, the employer must make reasonable efforts to accommodate the disability and qualify the employee for reemployment positions in the following order. So escalator, position equivalent to the escalator position, and the nearest approximation to the above. Protection from discharge. Reemployed person may not be discharged except for cause within 1 year of reemployment if the period of service was more than 180 days, or within 100 days after the reemployment if the service was more than 30 but less than 181. Employer has the burden to prove discharge during the protection period was for a cause. Protection can be based on conduct or other legitimate reasons. If on conduct, it must be reasonable to discharge an employee for the conduct in question. And the example of other legitimate reason for discharge would be a company downsizing. Pensions. Upon reemployment, a returning service member is treated for pension purposes as if employment has been continuous. Credit given for purposes of participation, vesting, and accrual of benefits, and USERRA applies to most pension plans, but not to the federal thrift savings plan. USERRA assistance. So again, that's going to be some links that we have here at the end of the slides. But DOL Vets provides assistance for any person or entity concerning USERRA, and ESGR is Vets' partner and providing assistance, especially to the Guard and Reserve members, their employers, and the general public. At the end of the slide, we actually have the Tennessee ESGR website. As promised, 5 common mistakes employers make under USERRA. Reference link is here at the bottom of the slide. Again, we can post that with the links. But the top 5 common mistakes employers make under USERRA is treating voluntary uniform service differently than involuntary. Okay, so ECT would be considered an involuntary service. Your virtual battle assemblies are actually an involuntary service, but your net fieldings and coming into the unit to do tasks, that is a voluntary service, and that is no less important than your involuntary service. Okay. The website below that I have listed, that'll actually go into so much more detail. Requiring employer permission or approval to perform uniform service? No. No. You don't need the permission or approval. You're giving them a heads up because you will be doing your task. Okay? Requiring documentation supporting an employee's uniform service. What that is specifically saying is, before you leave, your employer is asking you to supply documentation. That is not true. You can do the verbal, and if they have an issue, they can definitely contact me or the full-time staff or anyone, okay? But upon return, you do need to provide documentation within the 30 days, okay? And then number 4, failing to properly apply the escalator principle during and after the uniform service. Pardon me, sorry. And then finally, failing to address improper workplace comments about an employee's uniform service. So number 5, you can get more detail in that link below, but that's essentially you're a good employee, but you're not here enough. Or you're a good employee, but I can't trust you because you're always doing your military stuff. That is discrimination against you being in the uniformed services. Okay? And as promised, this is the end slide. Right here is the USERRA poster. You can go ahead and get that link over there. Again, I'll post it below. The USERRA website and the ESGR Tennessee. Those are all good links, and those are all going to be able to help us out as we move forward. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Come to me, come to the ARA full-time staff. We're here to help, and we want you to fulfill your military obligation. But at the bottom line, this is to help us as a unit become ready for deployment, to be ready to serve our country when called upon. Okay? Hopefully this clears up some things. And if not, give me a call, and I would be happy to do a one-on-one and let you know what your rights as a service member are. All right? 441, always forward.